So my name's Eve and I'm one of the assistant psychologists working at a private therapy clinic, and today I'm joined by one of my colleagues, Adam Baser, who has very kindly agreed to share his experience of a psychology undergraduate degree. Now Adam, I think I'm right in saying you graduated in 2018 with a BSc from University College London?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so some time ago, and yeah, I went to UCL.
Yeah, so you've had some time to reflect on the whole experience. Yeah. Okay, so I was just wondering if you could kind of take me back to when you were applying and kind of what made you choose psychology.
Yeah. I think when I was applying, uh, I chose psychology because the first reason was because of my teacher. Like she was such an amazing teacher. Like she just made our lessons so much fun. Her name is Miss Carr. I have such fond memories of her, but she was just so passionate about psychology. And I was kind of like the nerd that would stay behind and speak to the teacher at lunchtime. Like that's how much I really enjoyed our lessons. But also like when I first kind of came across the like Milgram studies on obedience and like Ash's studies on conformity, and the first time I actually came across like psychological experimentation, I was just blown away by, first of all, the findings, like how crazy they were. Like, for example, Milgram's obedience study, like that's, if you're not familiar with it, like I highly recommend reading up on it. Like it's just crazy. So that's where I kind of was interested in psychology. And when I was applying, it was kind of just picking the thing that I was most interested in. Like I wasn't really thinking about my like career goals or stuff like that. I was always just wanted to do what I enjoyed. And if there was like money in it or not money in it, I'm not really that kind of person who's concerned. Obviously, money's nice, but I was more interested in in doing something I enjoyed.
That's cool because I know a lot of people can find that kind of last year of sixth form quite a stressful one because you've got so many things to think about, and obviously you have to focus on your A levels as well. So it's nice that you were pretty set on psychology from the get go, really. And obviously you attended UCL, and that's a very aspirational uni for so many people. What do you think kind of made you like a really strong applicant at the time?
I think like first of all, like when I got the response from UCL saying that they accepted me, like it was, I just was not expecting it at all. It was kind of those things that you just like do it for fun. So when I got accepted, I was over the moon. But yeah, you're right. It's like quite a good university, especially for psychology. Um, but what made me a strong applicant? I guess that's quite a difficult question because it is so long ago. But I do remember taking my personal statement really seriously. And I got like loads of advice from the teachers in my sixth form, just like saying that the personal statement is like really important because it gives you a chance to kind of have like a dialogue with the people who are going to be selecting you. So I spent a lot of time on it, and I remember trying to be as genuine. I do remember having the thought that I need to be as genuine as I can. And I was like, I shouldn't write anything that I don't like feel. So I just remember taking that really seriously and asking loads of people to proofread it. And I also, my predicted grades. So when you're applying for university, your predicted grades are quite a big factor. Um, so you have your A level grades, which is your first year, and then you get your predicted grades, and that's what gets put forward to the university. So I did okay in GCSE, like average, but UCL were requiring predicted grades of A star AA, and I wasn't on track to get that. But I remember like speaking to my teachers and just being like, I'm gonna work so hard, and kind of just having like an honest discussion with them. And I think they kind of saw how seriously I was taking it, and they decided to like make my predicted AAA when it was supposed to be ABB or something like that. So that helped out a bit. But I'd say those two things and also extracurricular activities. Uh, like I remember in my personal statement, I spoke a lot about like traveling. Like I went to China with my school, which I was really lucky to do, and I also played like volleyball for the national team. So I just like tried to include loads of different things to make you look like a varied candidate and not just like one thing. But can I ask you, yeah, because I mean you went to Oxford, which is obviously an amazing university as well. So like, what made you a stronger applicant?
I don't know about that. Gosh, as you say, it was so long ago. It's a bit of a mean question. But again, I think for anyone, like, you just have to really like focus on your subject, and like not just like write some generic thing that's like, I came out the womb wanting to be an English student, because obviously they're just going to like roll their eyes at that. You definitely want to kind of do some extra reading in the subject. And yeah, I mean, grades are important, as you say, and I'm sure they like played a big part in like why I got an interview for Oxford. But it's like, as you say, like if you communicate with your teachers and you show that you're really you know, passionate about the subject, and you know, you're really taking it seriously, then I don't see how they can not, you know, follow up on that, and also, you know, support you in getting those grades as well. So yeah, that's good. So what was it about UCL that kind of really stood out to you?
Well, I think like as we've discussed, it's like quite a good academic university. I think at the time when I was applying, it was maybe third or second in the like ranking. So I was like really interested in going. And also I live in London as well, and so it's in London. And I went to the campus before, like, you know, when you kind of visit the campuses when you're deciding. And for me, it just was like, I don't know, it was just a perfect combination between like campus and city, and I really like that. Like it's not like closed off from the city of London, but it also is in a way. So I just really enjoyed the general atmosphere.
I feel like there's quite a lot of mixing between unis. That's the kind of the general impression I get from within the London unis. Is that kind of from your experience as well?
Relatively, yeah. I think it just depends on where you choose to socialize. But like, for example, the halls would be mixed. So you'd have like people from King's or Imperial, LSE and stuff like that. So that aspect of it was enjoyable, yeah.
Oh, really? That's cool. And so in terms of the course, getting on to like the more nitty gritty side of things, can you give me like a general overview of what you had to do throughout the 3 years you were there?
Yeah, sure, yeah. Well, I mean, we did so much, to be honest. But I think, yeah, we did. So just to give you an idea, like we did things like social psychology, research methods, health and clinical psychology, statistics, forensic psychology. Like we basically did everything in psychology, or close to everything in psychology. And the purpose of the degree is for you to kind of get good experience with a number of things, a number of fields in psychology, to then inform your decision on what you want to do after. So that was kind of that was the mentality I had when I was doing all of these modules, and like really trying to understand each one and find out like the interesting aspects of them to inform my decision on what I want to do after. So yeah, it was really comprehensive. Like we got a lot done, especially when I speak to like friends who studied at other unis who maybe had like less modules. So for example, I think we had 8 modules per year, and sometimes 10. So that was quite a lot compared to like other unis who have maybe 4 a year. But in either way, I feel like you're going to get a good exposure to a variety of fields in psychology to then make a good decision.
Yeah, and obviously, so it's like a very broad overview of everything. Did you kind of zero in on something in more detail when you did your dissertation?
So the way that it works with the dissertation process, you're kind of given a big booklet at the beginning, and it has like a big list of all the researchers at UCL, and you then decide who you want to work with, and you reach out to them, and either they can offer you a project or you can offer them a question. But I just didn't like any of them. So I ended up just like reaching out to a researcher who wasn't helping out, and just suggesting my own question. But yeah.
No, I think that's definitely one thing to kind of bear in mind. Like sometimes you don't have that much autonomy over dissertations like you might do in other subjects. I think in the sciences, maybe that's more so the case. But again, I could be speaking out of turn here. And what did you end up doing it on?
So it was on the basically a subject called Persuasion Knowledge. So it was in consumerism and consumer psychology. So I think what made me pick this kind of question was I had a bit of a dilemma at the time where I was doing quite a lot. So I was like playing volleyball quite seriously. So I'd be training like 2 to 3 times a day, also working part-time and then studying as well. So I kind of needed to make time. And so the good thing about psychology is there's like humans everywhere. So you can test anyone and you kind of have a big variety of questions that you can come up with. So I ended up doing my dissertation at the place I was working part-time. So I was working in a frozen yogurt place called Snog in London. And so I ended up doing it there. And I spoke to the CEO and said, can I like set up a study in Snog? And they were like so supportive, and ended up even giving me like literature to read over and stuff. But basically the question was about persuasion, like consumers' persuasion knowledge. And so persuasion knowledge is a consumer's views and ideas of how salespeople use tactics to persuade people to make a sale, basically. And so this knowledge can either be active or dormant. And when it's active, persuasion is less likely to work. So when a consumer is aware that they're trying to be persuaded, they're more likely to judge the salesperson as negative or insincere. And so that attempts to persuade them is less likely to occur. So I remember I was the first study that done it in a real situation. So like you're encouraged to make your dissertation novel. So that's how I made my novel. It was like the first one that was done in an actual setting.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, so we basically just tested something called cognitive demand and motive accessibility. So cognitive demand is the amount of like cognitive stress that you're put under when somebody is trying to persuade you. So the more cognitive stress you have, the less likely you are to notice the persuasion. So that was one kind of aspect of it. And the other one was the timing that persuasion was used. So we call this motive accessibility. So if a salesperson would flatter you or like try and give you a compliment before you make the purchase, then it's more plausible that they're doing it to make you make the purchase. But if it's after, then that kind of is gone because they've already made the money. So yeah, I kind of investigated that in a real life setting. So that was quite enjoyable.
That's so cool. Yeah, it's cool that you're very on board with it as well. And so obviously you mentioned that like you were studying full time and then you also had a part-time job and you were playing volleyball as well, very like to a very high level. Like that must have been so stressful and to try and balance everything.
Yeah, it was quite difficult to be fair at the time. But I was kind of doing things that I enjoyed. So every aspect I did enjoy. So when I was doing volleyball, I would also be looking forward to go to lectures, and after lectures, I'd be looking forward to go back to volleyball. So, although it was like difficult, it did kind of teach me how to kind of manage my time quite well, and think of creative ways, like doing my dissertation at Snog, to kind of deal with problems. But, yeah.
That's a clever way around it. I would never have thought of anything that smart or how to designate my time that usefully at uni. So
when you're forced to be creative, I feel like we end up being quite creative.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a thing. I think like work expands to the amount of time you kind of allot to it, and I definitely learned my lesson the hard way by like giving myself like massive like 14-hour days and getting about half an hour of work done in them, and it was so yeah, that definitely sounds very, very smart. Was there like a part of it that you kind of particularly enjoyed, or
a part of my degree generally?
Yeah.
I genuinely enjoyed every like module that we did, or I found something really enjoyable in every module. I think we were really lucky with the lectures that we had. But off the top of my head, like I enjoyed a module we had called Language and Cognition, which was, I found it just fascinating. So it was to do with how the language a person speaks ultimately influences the way they think. And so the way you think influences the way you behave. So like one of the examples that pops into my head is how in Greek, this is quite long ago, so it could be a bit wrong, but in Greek, they have like a deficiency in their future tense vocabulary. And then that was used to kind of explain their issues with spending behavior and saving behavior. So they're less likely to save money for a distant future because they can't conceptualize it because of their language. And so they're more likely to spend, and that kind of explained like why they're in the recession and stuff like that. Like I just really found that really fascinating. And another one was, we had perception. It was just called perception. It was just about perception. But I remember we had a question on. Do you remember that blue and black dress where people looked at it and they were like, "Oh, it's blue and black, or it's white and gold"?
Yeah, we did something similar as well.
Yeah. So like trying to understand the science behind it, and then we had like an exam question on it as well. But yeah, quite a few. I think most of my modules were really enjoyable.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, like in all of them there's always something that you're like, it's like, oh, that's cool, like because you can see how it plays out in real life, and that's just kind of inherently quite interesting, isn't it? Sorry, I can't.
Yeah.
And do you like have any idea about like what you want to do in the future, and like what was kind of like the information you received on careers you can do with a psychology degree?
Yeah, I think like when I graduated, we had the option to do a master's, like a mixed master's, which I was going to do, but then I kind of felt like I needed some time to just make the right decision. But in terms of the options available, there are so many for a psychologist. Like, if I look at my colleagues or my peers at the time, most of them actually went into areas like finance or like completely unrelated to psychology, and that's just because of the nature of the skills that you kind of obtain in the degree. They're like really transferable. But in the field of psychology, there's obviously clinical psychology, which is dealing with like mental health. There's forensic psychology, like psychology of crime, educational psychology, organizational. There's like so many areas to go into. So I would, if anybody who's like trying to make the decision, I would really recommend just doing some research on them. There is quite a few, and there's a lot of like information available. But there's definitely not a shortage of like options if you do a psychology BSc.
Yeah. It seems like you have to be kind of proficient in so many areas. I can't see how employers could kind of refute that in any way. Thank you so much, Adam, for taking the time to share your experience, and I'm sure that'll be really helpful to anyone that's kind of considering psychology as the subject they want to study at university.